Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and we have another fantastic show. See, you're waiting for me to say we had another great show. I didn't do that to you today. I said, well, no, we got a man. Now, actually, this is a stunning show. This is a life-changing, leadership-changing, powerful, turn you from the inside out show. My friend Ryan Gottfredson, Dr. Ryan Gottfredson, he was on the show twice. We talked about success mindsets. I have stolen so much of his material in talks and in working with clients and groups, and I try not to take credit for it. Occasionally, I probably do, but his stuff was so good. Well, he's written a book that is a leadership book that is going to turn the leadership world upside down. The book is entitled The Elevated Leader. Level up your leadership through vertical development. I am going to tell you something right now. The things that he's about to talk about in this book are not talked about in any leadership book that I've ever read, any leadership course I've ever taken, any leadership class, podcast I've ever heard. This is unique. It is different. And it is a different way, fundamentally different way of leadership. But here's the thing. He's right on the money. Right on the money with this. And we're going to talk to him about the elevated leader. You are going to want to pay attention. So get your pens and pencils ready. He's awesome. By the way, if you're watching us live on the different Facebook channels and LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitch and Twitter, if you're watching us live, don't be afraid to write in your questions. Dr. Gottfredson would be more than happy to answer these questions to you while we're live. And for those of you who watch us on DBTV, available at 250 million homes around the world, thanks for watching the show. This show is going to be awesome. Before we get to him, let's do what we do every week, right? Listen, I'm starting the new year off a little bit differently here, right? We usually talk about, you got to work on your training in the 4 areas of your life: physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Well, we still do that, but we're going to do it a little differently here because I think we just need to have a different and fresher outlook on it. Here's the thing. We rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on how you're doing in these areas, and the number doesn't matter. What matters is that you got a starting point and that you're going to get yourself better, all right? And it starts with you. That's the bottom line, right? No one else can change these things. You have to take the initiative to change it, and it's up to you to change yourself, the way you're thinking, your mindsets, and the way you're thinking about all these areas: physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing physically? And I mean, how are you doing, right? How are you feeling? How does your body feel? And I don't have to tell you what to do to change your body. You know what you need to do to change your body. It's not hard. If you're running out of breath going upstairs, you got to change that. If you've put on a few extra pounds, you know that you got to change that too, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say you're doing, right? That number, whatever it is, doesn't matter. What can you do to improve it? Okay. Second number is the mental intellectual number. And the truth of the matter is, I kept thinking about what is it that I want to say in this section. How is your learning going? Are you open to learning new things? Are you improving in every area of your life? Are you consuming information? Are you actively participating, whether it's reading a book, whether it's doing things actively that helps you grow in your knowledge and your understanding, being a constant learner? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate that? Knowing that you got to work your creative side, your right side of your brain, and your left side, which is your logical side. All right, what's that number? Okay, that's 2 numbers. Third number is the emotional number. That's not going to change. We've got way too much research in knowing that it really fundamentally comes down to 2 things. One is, how well are you able to control your emotions under stress and pressure and change, right? Because we don't like change, right? And then the second thing is, how well are you able to tap into and truly understand the emotions of another person, right? Evaluate yourself, scale to 1 to 10 on that. What's that number? And then finally, there's a spiritual number. And you know what? We all have a spirit that lives inside of us. We have a will. People talk about a will to live. They talk about their drive. They talk about this drive that's inside of us. It's more than that, because it also encompasses some sort of faith in belief that things that we don't see are going to happen, and we do it every day. Whether it's we drink a cup of coffee and we know it's not poisonous, or we put the key in the car and we turn it over and we believe that the car is going to start, or we all live by faith. Every step we take, because we're not guaranteed tomorrow. Yet we believe that tomorrow is going to exist. And it's the same token, what gives you a place of centeredness and joy in the midst of chaos, in the midst of craziness, that you can hold on to, that gives you that centered peace. And whatever that is it working for you? Whether it's God, or is it nature? Is it meditation? Is it something else? Yoga? Is it something else? Is it working for you? And whatever that score is for you, what do you need to do to change it? And maybe you need to just keep searching, right? And those 4 areas, those 4 numbers, right? They're like the air in your tires of your car, right? If the air in the tires of your car are not up to the right level, right? That level, what happens? Your car doesn't run efficiently. You're gonna start leaning one side to another, and you're always overcorrecting, and you're always trying to correct yourself at all times. The whole goal is to make sure that those levels are at the right height, and that you're working towards getting yourself to run more efficiently and effectively, and being the person that you're meant to be, right? And speaking of someone who does that, and he does that brilliantly, in my opinion, is Dr. Ryan Gottfredson. He is a mental success coach and a cutting-edge leadership consultant, trainer, and researcher. He helps improve organizations, leaders, teams, and employees improve their decision-making, effectiveness, agility, and culture through a focus on mindsets. He is a leadership management professor at Mahalo College of Business and Economics, California State University in Fullerton. He has a doctorate in organizational behavior and human resources from Indiana University. He's also opinion columnist for CEO World Magazine. His first book, Success Mindsets, which we've done on this show twice, is a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. I'm telling you that this latest book, entitled The Elevated Leader, is going to be a bestseller too. You want to get yourself a copy. You can find him and follow him on Instagram or LinkedIn, so check him out. He's absolutely awesome. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, and welcome back for a third time, Dr. Ryan Gottfredson. Welcome back, Ryan.
Hey, thanks for having me. And I've been so excited to chat about this book with you, because I know that you've read it, and I'm just itching to, hear what you think and see what direction you want to go with it.
Well, I love the book. It's absolutely. I told you before the show that it really struck me deeply, and it really made me think even more, and it changed my viewpoint, and not changed it. It didn't change it. It was things that I knew were right, but that you put words to. And that was the brilliancy of it. And it's just a brilliant book. All right, so let's just dig right in here. You talk about 2 types of leadership: horizontal leadership and vertical leadership, which is why the title, The Elevated Leader. Can you help us understand the difference between the two? What's horizontal leadership, as we traditionally know it, versus vertical leadership? And it's just, whatever way you want to do that. Can you help us out there?
Yeah, and if it's okay, I'm going to just change up your vernacular just a little bit.
Sure.
And talk about it not in terms of vertical and horizontal leadership, but in terms of development.
Okay.
So
thank you.
There are different processes that we can go through to develop ourselves. And what I would say, and what I've learned, is that 90%, and I would probably even argue more than 90%, of all development efforts focus on only one type of development. It's a form of development called horizontal development. Horizontal development is adding knowledge and skills to what we have. It's kind of like downloading an app onto an iPad. When we download an app onto an iPad, that's great, because now that iPad can do more. So one of the ways that we commonly see this is we and horizontal development isn't bad, right? We go out and we get degrees, we get certifications. These are like app downloads. I take an accounting class so that I can now do accounting things. But just because I have a bachelor's degree, a PhD, and an accounting certification, whatever it might be, that'll help me do more, but does it help me do better? In terms of, am I any more effective at navigating the tumultuousness of our world, change, pressure, stress, uncertainty, complexity? And I think the answer is really no. If I take an accounting class, I could do accounting things, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be any better of a person.
Mm.
And so if we want to improve who we are, if we want to improve our being as opposed to our doings, we need to focus on a different form of development. And that form of development is vertical development. And vertical development is a form of development that most people are not aware of. And rather than it being focused on adding an app onto the iPad, it is focused on upgrading the iPad's operating system. Or in other words, our own internal operating system, so that we can better navigate our world and the change, pressure, stress, uncertainty, and complexity that we face within our world.
Okay, let's break this down just a little bit more. When we're talking about the horizontal development, right? What are we specifically? What is the typical things that we get when we're talking about horizontal development of leadership?
Yeah, so it's knowledge and skills, right? So if I go into there's a leadership development program that's all about improving our emotional intelligence. What they're generally going to say is, here's what you need to know about emotional intelligence. Here's what you need to do to be more emotionally intelligent, right? You got to listen. They may even do role plays to help foster some of this skill building. But here's the interesting thing about it is, emotional intelligence is not a horizontal development characteristic. It is inherently a vertical development characteristic. And the reason why we say this is because it is connected to our body's nervous system. When we vertically develop, what we're literally doing is we're upgrading our body's nervous system, right? If somebody is deficient in emotional intelligence, meaning they have a hard time connecting and regulating their own emotions, or they have a hard time seeing and recognizing the emotions of others and navigating those in appropriate ways. When somebody has challenges in doing these things, it's not because they lack skill necessarily. What the research is finding is ultimately it's because their mind and their body has neurological deficiencies that prevent that from occurring. So for example, if my wiring in my body is programmed to be hyper vigilant, I'm going to be overly sensitive to my own emotions, and that inhibits me from being sensitive to the emotions of others. And how this plays out in leadership, when a leader is hyper vigilant, they prioritize the resolution of their own fears and insecurities. And how they operate then is they step in and they micromanage others, even though they know it's going to disrupt the emotions of others. But they do it because they're prioritizing their own fears and their own insecurities over the emotions and well-being of those around them.
So here's the thing. As we talk about development, right? And when I was in graduate school in psychology, I remember we talked about childhood development. But then it seems we get to adult development, we kind of just stopped. Help us understand, when it comes to adult development in psychology, does it just stop? Because that's kind of the message we, back then, that was kind of the message we kind of had was, we studied Jean Piaget, right? And we went through Erickson's stages of psychosocial development. But then we kind of get to the adults and we kind of assumed that everything we matured and et cetera, so forth. But that's different now. Is that what we're saying?
Yes, we've learned more, right? So, and we've known it for a long time. It's just only now coming to really mainstream thought. So the term vertical development is actually a fairly new term. It's only been around for about 10 years. It was when vertical development was coined. But the research behind vertical development dates back to the 1960s. And to your point, I think there is value in stepping into the history of where this comes from. So where these concepts around vertical development come from the field of developmental psychology, which has been a field of study since the 1880s. And from the 1880s up until the 1960s, the primary focus was on child development. And what they've learned from this is that as individuals go from infancy to adulthood, they go through a number of different developmental stages, and they do so rather automatically. Essentially, their development is a function of age. Well, in the 1960s, select developmental psychologists started to ask the question that you're referring to, which is, well, can adults develop? And if so, do they go through different developmental stages? And what they discovered is that, yes, adults can develop. And there are actually 3 primary adult development stages. But they also found that most adults actually don't develop. They stay at that base level of what we would call adult development or vertical development for the entirety of their adult lives. In fact, the statistics find that 64% of all adults operate at that base level of adult or vertical development. 35% get up to that second level, and only 1% get up to that third level of adult development.
That's astonishing. I mean, there is a part of me that, starts thinking about this psychologically and says, okay, why is that? It's the first question I have in my head is I want to go, well, why is it that we get stuck? And I guess maybe that's where I should start is why is it that we get stuck there?
Yeah. And to answer that question, and I think it becomes obvious when we understand this, is that at each of these levels, our body is programmed to fulfill different needs. Okay. So at that base level, our body is programmed for safety, comfort, and belonging. Right? We're kind of like penguins that we want to get to the center of the huddle because that's where it's the most safe, it's the most comfortable, and it's the most like we belong. And again, this is where 64% of all adults operate within. The second level needs are a dramatic shift. At this level, our needs become to stand out, advance, and get ahead. And in order to get there, we have to get to a cognitive and emotional space where we are okay being unsafe, uncomfortable, and not belonging in order to stand out, advance, and get ahead. And so many people, when we recognize this, it's just so many people are unwilling to let go of the need to feel safe, comfortable, and belong, that they are unable to grab hold of newer, higher ordered needs.
This is where we're going to start digging into these, what you call the 3 levels of vertical development, right? Yep. Mind 1.0, mind 2.0, mind 3.0. And, before we jump on that ship and you describe those more in more detail, because I think we need to, I think there becomes an issue I think you said it, I may be paraphrasing this in the wrong way, but it's rare that a team or a business or an organization is psychologically further ahead than the leader. Do I have that pretty close?
Yeah, no, spot on. Yeah. I think that an organization, its effectiveness is capped by the vertical altitude of the leader. And really the only way to elevate an organization is to elevate the vertical altitude of its leaders. Most commonly, the way that we see this is a removal of one leader who is less vertically developed and an insertion of another leader who is more vertically developed, right? We could surely do that, and I could give you some examples here in a second. But we can also develop the current leaders vertically. We just don't typically do that, right? Most organizations don't emphasize vertical development. Let me give you an example of this. So I think here's some examples of some insertions of some really vertically developed leaders. You can look at Satya Nadella at Microsoft. Steve Ballmer goes out, a less vertically developed leader. Satya Nadella comes in, a more vertically developed leader. Ed Catmull at Disney Animation. When Disney bought out Pixar, they brought in Ed Catmull, the head of Pixar Animation, to lead Disney Animation. And you see a complete revitalization of the organization. Another example is Alan Mulally at Ford. Alan Mulally stepped in at Ford when it was losing $12.7 billion a year. And in a matter of a couple of years, he turned it around and was able to help Ford survive the economic downturn of the late 2000s without any government bailout. And I've had the opportunity to get to know Alan, and one of the things he likes these concepts around vertical development. And one of the things that he commonly says to me is he says, we've got a big problem in the business world, because when you look at boards of directors, what is their primary job? Their primary job is to select the CEO. But then we ask the question, what vertical altitude are most boards of directors at? And they're usually at the second level of these three different levels. And so then when we understand that, then his question is, who are they most likely to select? Somebody who they resonate with that operates at the same level they do, or somebody who operates at a higher level than they do? And boards tend to select leaders who operate at the same level they do. And that decision ultimately caps the success of the organization unless they're able to develop their leaders.
This is so good. And we're going to talk about the three minds, the developed minds, and we're getting to it, but we're going to take a break. You're listening to Dr. Ryan Gottfredson, the book, The Elevated Leader. You're listening to him right here on A New Direction. Folks, Epic Physical Therapy, my physical therapist, listen, they work with people like you and me. They work with professional athletes. They are experienced in working with everyone. And what they do is they customize a treatment program just for you. It's not physical therapy in a box. So listen, when you are ready for your epic relief, epic recovery, and epic results, don't look any further. Go to Epic Physical Therapy. I'm just telling you, they're awesome. It's epicpt.com. It's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors. Listen, for more than 38 years, they have helped so many people transition in life. And you go, whoa, they're a real estate company. How do they help people transition? Think about it. Every place you've ever lived has been a transition in your life. And that's what they do, whether you're upsizing, downsizing, moving from an apartment to a home. The truth of the matter is that is a transition in life, and that's their main goal, is to help you make that transition as smoothly as possible. So when you're ready to make your next transition, right, whatever that may be, or maybe you know somebody who does, start with Linda Craft Team Realtors. That's lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Ryan Gottfredson, the book, The Elevated Leader. Level up your leadership through vertical development. Brilliant book. It's so good. All right, Ryan, in chapter 4, we introduced the 3 levels of vertical development. And by the way, I should let people know that when you are reading this book, by the way, you can sign up for an assessment that Ryan has here, that you could take this assessment and find out where you're at in these vertical levels. And it's great. It's awesome. He also has another assessment. If you listen to the show, he has his mindset assessment as well, which all plays a role in all of this. And I suggest that you check that out. We will certainly have it on the blog post so that you can access both of those as well. Is that okay with you, Ryan, if I do that?
No, that's awesome. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about these 3 levels of vertical development. Let's just start with Mind 1.0, self-preservation mode. So help us understand in detail, first of all, how many people are that, according to the research, how many people are in Mind 1.0? And then what is it basically, and how did we get there? And then we'll talk about moving into phase 2.
Yeah. So Mind 1.0, this is self-preservation mode. And this is because at this level, our body's nervous system is programmed to fulfill the needs of safety, comfort, and belonging, right? So and what happens at this level, and whether we're here or not, we should all be able to resonate with this level. When we're at this level, we seek to join and identify with groups or tribes that will help fulfill our needs of safety, comfort, and belonging. That could be a family, a social group, a friend group, a religious group, an employer, a political group, right? We join and identify with groups and tribes that help us feel safe, comfortable, and like we belong. And when we join these groups, we usually will say, okay, I don't want to take charge here, but I'll give up my power and independence and allow you to tell me what to do. And I will do that, provided you keep me safe, comfortable, and feeling like I belong. And so this is how Mind 1.0 people operate, right? They join an organization. I don't really want to take charge. I don't want too much responsibility, but if you tell me what to do, I'll go and do it. I'll show up at work on time. I'll do it, and I'll go home and I'll leave work at home, and that's good. But I don't really take charge. And when we operate in this manner, we are effectively operating as what we would call dependent thinkers. We're just dependent upon the thinking of others to kind of direct us and how we operate. So that's Mind 1.0. We call it I use the term Mind 1.0 because vertical development occurs in our mind. And I like the 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 language because it signifies kind of the quality of the internal operating system involved.
So how does complacency play a role in Mind 1.0?
At least, I think we could probably explore this in a variety of different ways. I think initially, to me, where it plays a role is complacency is a way to help us ensure our safety, comfort, and belonging, right? We don't want to get outside of our comfort zone because that feels unsafe, uncomfortable, and we may not belong, right? We may do something that our group doesn't necessarily love that we're doing. I don't know. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think you talk about some examples of where companies got complacent, and maybe give one or two examples of those where companies just got complacent, and I basically don't see them anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at any organization that has gone out of business, and I think you can see that. And the thing about it is, I'm not sure there's any CEO of a failing organization that said, "Oh yeah, I was complacent." No, they were working their butt off. The problem is they had fears around, not feeling safe or comfortable. So a classic example, I think, is Blockbuster. Huge organization, brick and mortar stores where people can rent videos. And along comes Reid Hoffman, who's now the CEO of Netflix, comes into Blockbuster and essentially says in the early days of Netflix, buy us and we will run your online business. And John Antioco, the CEO of Blockbuster, ran him out of the building effectively. Like, he just didn't believe in the online presence at that time. And would John Antioco ever say that he was complacent? No. But at least at a subconscious level, if not a conscious level, he had a fear about having the organization doing something that they hadn't done in the past, right? There is no measure of success. There's no best practices for operating an online business at the time, but there is best practices for operating a brick and mortar store. And so he's like, well, there's uncertainty with the online business, so I don't want to do that. There is certainty, at least in his mind, for operating the brick and mortar business. That's my area of expertise, so I'm going to continue to do that. So that by sticking with convention and being unwilling to explore non-conventional practices, he effectively doomed the organization.
Some shocking statistics that you have here on Mind 1.0 leaders. 64% of all adults, 7% of all executives operate primarily in Mind 1.0. That's actually, I thought that was actually pretty high. Do I have that wrong?
No, it is 64%. And when somebody operates at this level, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. Again, right. Whether we operate at this level or not, we've all been there. Right. I would say that most of my family members operate in Mind 1.0, right?
Yes.
And that's fine. I love them. They're great people. Here's a term. I'm going to throw in a term here we haven't brought up yet. And it's a mouthful, but It's cognitive and emotional sophistication.
Mm,
As we vertically develop, what we are actually doing is enhancing our cognitive and emotional sophistication.
mm,
Right, let me give you an example. I won't name any names. I have a family member who, when we're watching a sporting event, they will go ballistic at a bad call by a referee. Is that cognitively and emotionally sophisticated? No, their emotions, there's a very strong and visceral knee-jerk reaction
right.
that they have a hard time controlling. And it is a signal of a lack of cognitive and emotional sophistication,
Mm,
right? Here's the thing about vertical development. We can always vertically develop. We could always continue to refine our own
yes.
cognitive and emotional sophistication. And as we talk about these different levels, what we're doing as we go from one level to another is we're stepping up in our cognitive and emotional sophistication.
This is a journey, not a destination, right?
Yep.
I mean, even if you are in the 3.0, it's not like you're perfect because you can bounce down occasionally down to 1 or 2,
Yep.
right? To
Yep.
right, we've all done that. All right, so then let's move. Speaking of 2.0, Mind 2.0 development, what is that exactly? And help us understand it, how we might know if we're there.
Yeah, Mind 2.0 people are focused on making progress. This is a self-focused reward mode. Again, our internal operating system shifts its needs. So
Mm,
at the second level, we have the needs to stand out, advance, and get ahead. We want to be recognized. We want to be seen. And we're willing to be unsafe, uncomfortable, and not belong in order to stand out, advance, and get ahead.
mm,
And as we make this shift, we shift away from being a dependent thinker to now becoming an independent thinker. We start to develop our own independent beliefs. We push back against our tribe's beliefs. Not that we necessarily have to leave that tribe, but we're able to say with our tribe, I believe that which you believe, but there's also a few things that I don't believe, and I'm going to stand independently in those beliefs.
mm.
And when we make this shift from dependence to independence and come up with our own beliefs, we oftentimes will hold rather tightly to these beliefs. Like there's a lot of work that has gone into coming up with these internal beliefs that we're holding on to. And we generally want to now run with those beliefs. And
Mm.
that means that we want to step into leadership positions so that we can implement our beliefs. And Mind 2.0 people, they recognize that there's a whole lot of Mind 1.0 people out there, and they recognize that they can try to get those Mind 1.0 people to help them stand out, advance, and get ahead.
Mm.
And they could do that by helping them feel safe, comfortable, and like they belong. And so here's where we find there's a shift. So we've given the statistics 64% of people operate at Mind 1.0, 35% operate at Mind 2.0. But you gave the statistics around executives 7% operate at Mind 1.0, 85% of executives operate in Mind 2.0. They're in this position where I'm leading an organization. I want to be seen and recognized by others. I'm also in a position to direct and control others so that they can help me stand out, advance, and get ahead.
Okay, so you used a word, control, which I think is an interesting word to use. So is a Mind 2.0 leader, a person who's in that development, that area, are they more apt to want to control what's going on in the organization more so than 1.0?
Yes, and of course we need to recognize that there's healthier ways of control and there's less healthy ways of control. And when we think about these levels, it's not like these levels are really narrow. Like there's room for growth within each of these levels. So like a bottom level Mind 2.0 person are the people that we would consider to be narcissists, right? And they want control for probably not the right reasons. We get higher level 2.0 people who are much more generous with their need for control. But it nonetheless is they want to have it's not just control. They just want to have the ability to live out and facilitate their beliefs that they espouse.
Okay. Yeah, it seems to me, I don't know, you brought up the Microsoft example between Ballmer and, I think about, well, and I even think about Jack Welch, who is still a hero of many people, right? And I guess we would throw him in a 2.0 category, would we not?
We would. And there's some signals for this, right? One of his books that he wrote was called Winning. I don't think we would ever find a Mind 3.0 person ever write a book called Winning.
No.
And he implemented just practices that were about fostering competition, about driving results, right? So, and hindsight is always 2020 because he was celebrated when he was a CEO. But we look back in time and say all of the decisions that he made were to ensure the best financial position on a quarter by quarter basis.
Right.
He was focused on the short-term wins and was neglecting the longer-term bigger picture because when he left as CEO, the organization of GE was a shell of what it used to be.
Mm.
And effectively it went defunct and is now, incremental compared to what it was. And it's because he prioritized the short-term results and outcomes over the long-term growth and purpose. And that's one of the biggest distinguisher between a Mind 2.0 leader and a Mind 3.0 leader. Mind 2.0 leaders are focused on short-term and outcomes. Let me give you an example. I'm working with this executive team right now, and I asked the COO, how do you measure success in your business? And she said, double-digit growth year over year. And outwardly, I'm like, okay, that's right. Inwardly, I'm like, no, like that is so results oriented. And just for context, this is an organization that operates in the medical documentation space. Like when you go to a doctor's office and you're filling out paperwork, you're probably using this company's product. This company touches 1 billion people on an annual basis. They can change the medical landscape. And I've got the COO telling me they measure success by double-digit growth year over year. Right? When you gave the kind of the advertisement for this real estate company, the way that you talked about this company was not in terms of we want to sell homes or we want to make money, we want to hit results. It was we want to help people manage the transitions in their lives more effectively. That's a purpose. That's a long-term purpose. To me, that's got Mind 3.0 written all over it. But it's most organizations, you look at Wells Fargo, Enron, you can think about some of these classic examples. What leads an organization to ever engage in fraudulent behavior? It's because they're more focused on results than they are on their purpose. And that's what happens when we're in Mind 2.0.
Yeah, matter of fact, I think you used the phrase in this chapter, they often will focus on profit over people.
Yep.
Right. And so there's something, so I know there's people going, oh my gosh, I'm in level 1 or I'm in level 2. Let's give them some hope.
well, let me say, I think I'm in level 2.
Okay.
Like, I think I'm inspiring to level 3. And I think I spend some time there, but I don't think that's where my home base is.
Okay.
Right. And I'm working on it myself for sure.
All right. So, but we can get there, right? I mean, that's the thing is that you and I and everybody out who's listening to the show can get there to Mind 3.0. But what is this Mind 3.0 that we're trying to stay in? I guess you call it the center of gravity. We're trying to get a center of gravity there. Is that what we're trying to do?
Yeah, and I think it's probably let's bring up center of gravity right after we talk about Mind 3.0. I think it'll make sense.
Okay.
So Mind 3.0, again, we're going to see a rather significant shift in the needs our body is programmed to fulfill. At this Mind 3.0 level, well, let me back up. So the needs at Mind 1.0, we would say are to stand in. our needs at Mind 2.0 are to now stand out. At Mind 3.0, we don't care about standing in and we don't care about standing out. All we care about is contributing, adding value, and lifting others. And I hope just in saying this, you get the feeling and even recognize that at the Mind 1.0 and Mind 2.0 levels, our body is programmed to focus on ourselves. It's only when we get up to this Mind 3.0 level that now we become focused on something bigger than ourselves. And a part of this transition is we've gone from a dependent thinker at Mind 1.0 to an independent thinker at Mind 2.0. At this Mind 3.0 level, we now become an interdependent thinker. Right? Mind 3.0 people, what I've learned is that they rarely take a polarizing stance. In fact, where we oftentimes find them, it's not that they can't take a stance, but we oftentimes find them sitting in the messiness of the middle. Because they recognize that with anything, like we could take any politically charged topic, like, I don't know, abortion, gun control, etc. And Mind 3.0 recognize that there is value to the positions on either side of the aisle. And they want to understand these positions. That's what's critical to them. After they understand them, they may take a stance on one side or the other, but rarely are they going to be polarized. So they become much more complex and interdependent thinkers. They're less likely to, or they have a greater ability to now focus more on the big picture, the long term, as opposed to the short term and hitting the short term incentives. So this is where we find a lot of leaders. Well, really, it's only Mind 3.0 leaders that will emphasize the importance of culture in the organization. Because culture is never a short-term play. That is always a long-term play. So when we see somebody like Satya Nadella come in as CEO of Microsoft, and he says the C in CEO stands for curator of culture. That's my number one priority. I want to bring soul back into Microsoft. Like that's how Mind 3.0 leaders think. It's about fostering the right environment for our people to thrive as opposed to focusing on results. Because they know if I could foster the right environment for my people to thrive, of course we're going to hit our results. That's going to be the natural byproduct of that. But Mind 2.0 leaders have a hard time seeing and making sense of that connection.
Before we go to break, I'm just going to point out the statistics here that you point out here is 8% of all executives and 1% of all adults operate at Mind 3.0.
That's it. That's crazy. It. And so we don't have very many good examples of Mind 3.0 leaders, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's amazing. His name is Dr. Ryan Gottfredson. The book, The Elevated Leader, Level Up Your Leadership Through Vertical Development. He's awesome. You're listening to him right here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, Epic Physical Therapy. Listen, I got to tell you something about them. They offer the most advanced, top-of-the-line equipment. You've heard me talk about it, the Ultra G anti-gravity treadmill, Normatec sleeves, Game Ready, my favorite. They're certified in the most comprehensive cutting-edge treatments available, whether it's blood flow restriction therapy, dry needling, cupping, and a whole bunch more. Listen, when you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, and your epic results, don't look any further. Go to Epic PT. That's EPICPT.com. Linda Craft Team Realtors, 38 years in the business. Their customers call them the legends of customer service. But what they're really most proud of is the thousands of people that they've helped all over the world transition into their next part of their life. Because the truth of the matter is, wherever you have lived, right, it has been a transition. And that's what excites them, that they're part of your life and that they're part of your transition, whatever that may be, whether it's getting to a larger home, downsizing, maybe it's new kids, whatever it may be. They're excited to do that. They would love to be part of that too with you. So when you're ready to make your next transition in your home and in your house, you know what? Talk to the team, the Linda Craft team. They love transitions. It's lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. We're back here on A New Direction with my friend Ryan Gottfredson, and we are talking through the elevated leader, vertical development. It's really groundbreaking. It's not talked about. I've never heard it talked about. I've never, in the 230 plus shows that we've done, and there's probably been 100 of them that we've talked about leadership development. We've never have I read a book that's talked about leadership in this way in terms of developing leadership, and it's absolutely powerful book. It's absolutely fantastic. You need to do this. So we're in the final segment of the show, and Ryan, there's so many things that we could be talking about, but I really am excited about talking about one particular area, and I really want to get there because I know we could talk about the traits and the situation trait approach, and we could talk about the neuroscience of the whole thing, but I really want to talk about how trauma affects us in this vertical development, because it's not talked about anywhere in the literature, and I think it is absolutely critical that we need to discuss, at least on this show for a little bit, is how trauma affects us in our development. So can we talk about that?
I would love to, because I think that this brings up the most meaningful aspect of understanding vertical development, is that if we want to vertically develop, if we want to enhance our vertical altitude so that we operate at a more cognitively and emotionally sophisticated level, what that foundationally means is that we actually have to heal our body's nervous system from past wounds or trauma, whatever they might be. And here's the unfortunate statistic. At least 70% of all adults have experienced trauma to the degree to which it has negatively impacted their body's internal operating system, their body's nervous system, which has caused them to have, to be honest, vertical altitude deficiencies. And if we ever want to elevate, at the end of the day, what we've got to do is we've got to heal our body's nervous system so that we are, because here's what goes on with trauma, psychological trauma, is when we experience it, our body is programmed to say, we need to self-protect so this never happens again. We need greater safety. We need greater comfort. We need greater belonging. And that makes sense because it will keep us safe, comfortable, and belong. But it may also be holding us back for becoming the people that we want to be and having the positive influence that we want to have, right? So if I'm really concerned about, failing in business as an entrepreneur, I will never start a business. And if I never start a business, I probably won't have the positive impact that I could potentially have in the world. So it makes sense to not start a business if we're worried about, we're afraid of what might, bad things that might happen. But as long as we hold on to those fears, it's going to hold ourselves back from being the best version of ourselves.
You define trauma here as an event or experience is only traumatic if it disrupts or alters the wiring in our brain and related nervous system. And so you say, thus, trauma is less about what we experience and more about how our bodies react to what we experience. How many people are unaware? Well, I shouldn't say how many people, because I don't think we know that exact number, but would you say like more than 50% or the majority of us, or maybe less than that, have trauma that they're just not really aware of or that they're in denial about in some level?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I'm one of those people who have been that way. So in all honesty, I'm 39. I spent 37 years, and at least, 17 to 19 years of adulthood believing that I didn't have trauma in my background.
Right.
And over the last 2 years, I've been on my own vertical development journey, and I've essentially hired a therapist to help me in my process. And she's a trauma therapist. And one of the things that I've discovered working with her is that while my parents were always there for me physically, like they stayed married, they went to every basketball game I ever played, my parents were rarely there for me emotionally. And effectively, I was emotionally neglected as a child. And I didn't really realize it because I just thought that was just how I grew up. That was my norm. But I was not supported in the way that a child should be supported emotionally. And that has left indelible marks on how I've lived my life.
Mm.
And so I kind of went about living my life not thinking that I had trauma, and to awakening to, oh my goodness, I've have experienced emotional neglect, and all of the research related to trauma finds that emotional neglect is as bad, if not worse, than physical abuse in terms of the damage on our body's neurological system.
Mm.
And so now part of my vertical development journey is I actively am focused on healing from my trauma. I don't know if everybody needs a therapist, but the point of therapy as a whole is to improve the functionality of our brain so that it works in the manner that it's really designed to work, which is allowing us to focus more on adding value to the world as opposed to just simply protecting ourselves.
Do you have suggestions? People who go into denial about trauma, right? And I was one of those people for decades. I'm older than you. And for decades, I was in denial that I had trauma in my life. And it was a journey of stubbornness, overcoming stubbornness, and finally getting the aha moment. My wife was part of that, who gave me the aha moment, another coach, and maybe some therapy I would say maybe, and some therapy where I had the aha moment where I went, oh my gosh, this was wrong, right? And how do you get people to, because I think the statistics are that 61% of the public has experienced some sort of an adult crisis, that you will, an adverse childhood experience. Sorry, an
Yep.
adverse childhood experience, an ACE, where that's affecting them. How do we get them to see it?
Well, it's not easy. And one of the challenges is because one of our default reactions to trauma is to actually hide the trauma. Like our body really wants to do that. Let me give you an example. It's not uncommon for me in my coaching with CEOs. I've got an exercise that I walk them through, and I get to the point where I ask them this question, and it's a part of the flow. It's not like it comes fully out of left field, but I ask them, what fear is going on here for you? And it's not uncommon. In fact, I would say 15-ish% of all executives that I walk through this exercise, their response will be, I don't have any fear. I'm not driven by fear. And it always leaves me scratching my head thinking, do you not have any fear, or are you unable to actually connect with the fears that you do have? Because I happen to believe that everybody has fears.
Oh gosh, yes.
And so that's the challenge, is that part of the actual neural adaptation of receiving trauma is an inability to connect with ourselves. It's what's called dissociation. And it's one of the most common effects of psychological trauma, is this inability to connect with our own feeling. So I think you're essentially asking the question, how do we get people to the place where they actually can open up? And I don't think that there's any one magic solution, but what's been helpful for me is to become trauma informed, to learn about trauma, what it does to our bodies, and the basics around how we go about healing trauma. So I think that has been helpful for me. But this also brings up, and I think an important point to make, which is, and this is something vertical development experts have found, is that in order for us to vertically develop, we actually need a heat experience. We need an experience that occurs in our life that causes us to question, reevaluate, and try out different ways of thinking and processing our world. Like actually questioning how I've been viewing the world correct? And are there better ways of viewing the world? And if people can have those types of experiences, those can occur externally, right? For example, I would say one of my external events was I was fired from my job. That caused me to reevaluate things. And I took advantage of it and I did do it. Now, not everybody that has a heat experience vertically develops. They need to have the proper support, the proper guidance, and they need to go through the process of that reevaluation. But we can also create internal heat experiences. And that's what I generally try to do in the leadership development work that I do. And I do that through a focus on mindsets. I help people to awaken to how they see and interpret their world. And I get them to evaluate, is how I'm seeing and interpreting the world a good way to do so? Is it cognitively and emotionally sophisticated? And by helping them awaken to the quality of their mindset, what it does is it opens the door for this vertical development journey to occur. And so I think at the basic level is what the first step of the vertical development journey is: awareness, greater awareness. And to your point, we got to figure out a way to help people step into that door. And that's it. For people who haven't done it, it's scary. But as somebody, I feel like I'm somebody who has done it. What I would say is, while it's not easy, it's easier than you think, and it's not as scary as you think it will be.
We've been on an hour, Doc. I know, it's crazy, but we could go on for another 3 and still not get through this. Tell folks how they can get a hold of you. I'll tell them how to get a hold of the book, but tell them how they can get a hold of you.
Best way is my website, RyanGottfredson.com. Would love to help anybody or any organization facilitate the vertical development journey for themselves or for others, so that we can upgrade our internal operating systems, operate at a higher level, and have a greater positive impact on our world.
That's awesome. He was awesome. The elevated leader. Level up your leadership through vertical development. Dr. Ryan Gottfredson. He is amazing. He is awesome. Get the book. I'm telling you, you're not going to be disappointed. It's going to change you. It's going to change your leaders. It's going to change your business. Folks, it's the show. I remind you that you're in control of 3 things in your life: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. Doesn't matter what's going on in your life. You have control of your attitude, your effort, and getting back up again. Take advantage of it, because that is in your control. I'll be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great book. It's going to be another great show. As I say to you every week, thank you. You had a lot of choices. You chose us. And to everyone, everywhere, all over the world, ciao, everybody.